Welcome to the Network Marketing Made Simple podcast. I am your host, Scott Aaron, and each and every week I'm going to come to you with short, simple, and powerful tactics of how you can grow your network marketing business, brand, bank account, and impact on those around you. And just remember, network marketing is not easy, but it can be made easy with simple steps to create the success that you truly deserve. So, Jesse, welcome to today's episode. You know, I'm really excited about this episode for a number of reasons. You know, we have similar haircuts, number one. Number two, we have very, like when we first connected, just a strangely relatable background being in health and wellness, and then getting into entrepreneurship, and then getting into coaching, and then podcasting, and everything that we both have going on. It's just been this synergistic connection that took us all this time to finally connect with each other through 6 degrees of separation. Your wife was at and is part of a mastermind that's run by one of my good friends, Brooke Thomas, and my book happened to be on the table, and she says, you got to reach out to this guy, and now here we are. But you know, for a lot of my audience, Jesse, that is not familiar with you and what you do now or where you've come from, why don't you tell the audience a little bit of your backstory? But more importantly, what I love knowing personally, but also the audience does, is that moment when your entrepreneurial spark was lit and it's never gone out since. What was that moment? But who is Jesse and how did you get to where you are?
Yeah, so kind of my story, you know, started, you know, as a young kid. I grew up in Spokane, Washington, which is a small town. Well, not super small, but smaller. And but basically, I was kind of addicted to sports. I was addicted to going to the gym. I started boxing at 9 years old. I literally played 3 to 4 sports year round. But football was kind of my go-to sport. And I love football because, you know, I love to work out. I love the physical contact. And I always felt like, you know, when you put a helmet on, it was like you turned into, you know, this action figure. And, you know, you could really be whoever you wanted to be. But I grew up with an alcoholic father. And, you know, my dad seemed to give me the most love and attention when I played sports. And that was kind of how I got my feedback from him. That was kind of how I got, I just connected with him. And so I excelled at sports. That was kind of what I leveraged. And I remember, you know, I was always kind of the guy getting everybody to work out. I was always the guy, you know, kind of like, hey, let's go to the gym, training everybody. But I was the guy who was kind of willing to do whatever it took to be, you know, the top athlete, to be successful, to kind of find the edge at 16, you know, as we talked about the last time, is I started bodybuilding. I got super serious about it, but I met a guy at the gym who looked like Mr. Clean. And, you know, I made friends with him. Well, come to find out, he was kind of the local steroid dealer. And I got into, you know, buying steroids from him. All of a sudden, my friends are like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I'm just working out. The same thing you guys are. And all of a sudden, my friends start, and I'm the one supplying it to them. And so that was really my first taste of being an entrepreneur. It was like I was supplying my friends' needs to basically pay for my own. And right or wrong, what that taught me at that time was how to begin to influence people, how to begin to sell. You know, let's face it, when you have an illegal substance and you're selling it to people, you have to do it very strategically. Otherwise, you know, you get caught. So that was really my first taste of being an entrepreneur. And as we started going through this, one of the things that I realized is, I had an edge to find. Even for that, I was like, okay, I'm going to find the best possible stuff for myself and for my customers. And so I started researching, reading about it, all this stuff. just so I could understand how to sell it to people, how to explain it to them. And as I did that, I continued to excel at sports. I continued to excel. I mean, imagine a kid who's 16, 17, he's benching like 405, squatting 500 pounds, and you're lifting more than like guys in college, and you're yet like a senior in high school. I remember going to a lifting meet, and one guy's like squatting 405 and I'm benching 405, and he's like the top squatter. And I'm like repping that out for like 10, 12 reps. And so as I kept going, I really became addicted to the gym. I can remember as early as 17, drawing out diagrams of what my gym was going to look like one day. And I went to college, played some junior college football, ended up at the time getting a girl pregnant, and ended up being done with college after my first season of football, which was at a junior college down in California. And I ended up moving back home, and I started working, and ended up having my son at 19. And I just started working and kind of gave up on my dream of playing sports, playing football. And I really just got into bodybuilding. And one of the things that kind of happened is I took a hardcore right turn into bodybuilding. And so I got into pretty hardcore use of anabolics. I got into selling them to the point where I was going to Mexico, bringing them back across the border, bringing them on flights, and really like my customers was everybody at all the gyms. And so 21, 22 rolls around, and I'm like, hey, I think I want to be a personal trainer, because I was kind of already doing it anyways. The problem was I was selling drugs to everybody in the gym that no one would hire me to be a trainer, because they knew like, hey, this guy's bad news. This guy, there's no way this guy's going to work for us. And so I could not get a job at any of the gyms in my town, because I was the known, steroid dealer. And so I made a decision to kind of pack up and move to Seattle, Washington. I had an opportunity at the time to get a job at a training gym over there. And I remember moving to Puyallup, Washington. I had no car. I had no money. I had a couple like boxes of clothes. And one of my friends allowed me to move in with him. And in trade, I had to give up kind of my supply person, and he would let me, live with him and borrow a car and be able to drive to and from work. And so, I was kind of like, okay, well, that's really all I have right now. And so at about 23 years old, I start working at a gym, and it was about an hour away from where I lived. If there was a lot of traffic, it was an hour and a half. And so I did that for about 8 months, and I was making less money than it took to drive to work. And so I was actually losing money as I drove to work. And so I had to make money on the side doing kind of hustle, other things. But one of the things that I realized is that was kind of the first time where I was like, hey, this is what I'm passionate about. I didn't care that I wasn't making any money, because I was passionate about what I was doing. But I also, kind of got down on myself, because I'm like, man, can you really make any money as a trainer? Or is this, even my parents are like, hey, it's just a hobby. That's not a real job. And I had to be honest with you, back then, that's kind of how it felt. It felt like a hobby and not a job. So about 8 months goes by, and I'm like, listen, I got to do something else. I end up going to this other box gym at the time, and I go in for this interview, and this guy says, listen, you're kind of quiet. You're kind of, off as far as like, we don't know if you're actually going to be a guy who's going to fit here. And he's like, here's what I need you to do. I need you to go to 5 people. I need you to ask what their goals are, what their names are, and why they're here. And I remember looking him in the eye, and I'm thinking like, listen, I'm either going to like punch this guy because he was kind of an ass, or I'm going to go do this. But I kind of thought for a second, like, okay, I need this job worse than anything right now. because my life's not really going anywhere. And so I went out on the floor and I met 5 people, got everything, their information, why they were there, their names, their goals. I came back and I said, listen, here's all the stuff about them. And he was kind of blown away at the information I got from him. And so he said, okay, you're hired. And so for the next 30 days, I was the janitor trainer. If you remember that, is when you first started, you're out cleaning equipment, picking it up. And so I went out for the first 30 days and just started introducing myself to everybody in the gym, cleaning equipment, putting stuff away. And most of them kind of blew me off. And they're like, okay, who's this guy? Who's he think he is? By the second month, they started talking to me. And as they started talking to me, I got to know them. And I started saying, hey, there's a better way you can do this exercise. And so as I did that, I started building up this rapport with them. By the third month, I was the top trainer. I sold the most training in that gym. By the third month, by the fourth month, I had sold the most training in the company. And so it took me about 6 months. I got promoted to weekend fitness director, then eventually fitness director. A year and a half into it, I'm the general manager. But I literally I busted my ass getting to know everybody in the gym. Everybody knew who I was. And I worked at that company for about 4.5, 5 years. And they got to a place where they were ready to sell. And I kind of, back then it was LA Fitness was kind of the new thing coming in. But I had learned basically the whole business side, the whole, not just training, but like, hey, how to manage a club, how to manage, the systems and things like that. And it got to a place where I found out they were going to sell. And I had a friend who kind of had an in with the company that knew exactly when it was going to happen. And he said, listen, you need to get ready to either make the leap to come do this, or you're going to go do your own thing and you're going to get stuck. And so the day that they sold one last club before they make that deal, I walked in and I said, listen, I'm done. I'm no longer an employee here. I would thank you for the opportunity. And I walked out and everybody was kind of blown away because no one knew what was going on. And so I went and signed a lease that I'd found a place down the street, 2,000 square feet. Me and my wife we signed a lease. 90 days later, we have a 2,000 square foot training facility that we opened up. So we opened up and, I got my own business started with my wife. Within 2.5 years, we were doing about $65,000 a month out of a 2,000 square foot facility. Now, keep in mind, it had all fixed equipment at the time. And so, out of that 2,000 square feet, there was about 800 square feet of open space. So we are warming people up in the parking lot, getting them to do stuff outside. And keep in mind, we're in, an hour south of Seattle where it's raining in a place called Tacoma, Washington. You hear the rain stories, warming people up in the rain, bringing them inside. Eventually, I expanded about 6 months later into a 4,500 square foot facility. And then eventually we opened up a second location that was across the bridge in a place called Gig Harbor. There was a 6,000 square foot location. And basically got to a place where, me and my wife, we were having kids. We had a couple kids. And about 2014, we just kind of became disconnected. And, me and my wife, the business was super important, but I was kind of always working. I'd get home a lot of times, 7, 8 o'clock at night. She's focused on the kids. We got really disconnected. And I remember receiving a phone call back in like December of 2014 to where, she calls me and she's on the phone crying and she's like, listen, I need you to come to such and such place. I knew she was kind of getting some counseling. I thought it was really just kind of for her. I had no idea that I had, part of the effect of that, but she's crying. I could tell she was upset. And I remember being frustrated, like, man, I got to take off work to go deal with this shit. And I walk into the counselor's office and my wife's crying. The counselor's sitting there and she's like, do you have any idea why you're here? And I'm like, I have no idea like what the hell's going on. And, my wife turns to me and she's like, I don't feel like I can tell you what's wrong with me because I feel like, you're going to leave me or not care if I tell you. And I'm sitting there thinking like, oh shit, like I had no idea that my wife was in that much pain because I had been so focused on building the business. And so at that point in time, I realized that I needed to make some changes. And so I ended up, I had been kind of battling just some things with my business and just with myself. And I ended up going through a program 4 weeks later, a program called Wake Up Warrior, which was it's called Warrior Week. And of course I went, saying, hey, I want to go for my business and really like take it to the next level, which is what most guys do, is, hey, I'm going to go take my business to the next level and that'll fix everything. And as I went in there, within the first hour of being there, I basically, have this guy in my face, like breaking me down. And he's like, are you serious? You're really here for business? And I'm like, yeah, I'm here for business. He's like, then he starts telling me all the shit wrong in my marriage, all the shit wrong and just, being disconnected and just not having a purpose other than just to work more. And I realized within the first like hour, I'm like, holy shit, like I'm really here for my wife and my kids and just showing up on how to be a better husband, father. And that week really made me realize, how I'd not been showing up as a husband, father, and leader in my home. And, keep in mind, like we learned from, our fathers who learned from their fathers. And so there was really never a blueprint on how to be a husband, how to be a father, how to show up for your wife and just how to like balance everything out as an entrepreneur. And I thought I was doing amazing because like here I am bringing home the money and the money was pretty good. And so like I'm thinking like, hey, I'm doing pretty good. And anyway, so we go through this and, this program's like $10,000 to go through just for a week. They had an upsell to stay in the program that was $50,000 for 6 months. Now keep in mind, this is like 2015. The most money I'd ever spent on any type of coaching was about $3,000. And it was for personal training, just having someone to kind of help with my business. And so all of a sudden I'm getting offered to stay in this program for 6 months at $50K. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like a down payment on a house. And so anyways, my wife says no, so I'm like, hey, I want to do this. She's like, no, you need to come home and live this. And I want to see you I want you to prove it. So I come back home and basically, lived the part that I had been taught, which was taking my wife on date nights, just leaving her messages, just kind of getting in her world. The same thing with my kids and just completely changing the way that I showed up as a husband, father, leader in my home. And I did that for 6 months and me and my wife, really battled with this new style. Cause of course I came home and I said, listen, like, here's how we're going to live from now on. Like we're changing it. I'm changing everything. If you don't like it, good, but we're going to keep doing this anyways. And so 6 months later was our 10-year anniversary. And we ended up coming back down to Laguna Beach. She had rearranged me she bought me the $50,000 in coaching because she had seen such the change in me that 6 months that she's like, I don't ever want you to stop doing this. She invested in me $50,000. And I kept coaching. And about a year later, I kind of realized, hey, I want to, I want to do this, myself. I want to lead men. I want to, I was kind of the case study of the whole program for probably the first year and a half I was in it. And I realized I really wanted to lead other men who had like the similar problem with just being disconnected, all business. And so I started coaching and volunteering, and I did that for about a year. And then I finally got offered a paid position. And I came on as one of the Warrior Week coaches. I was, one of the main trainers for them. And I still had my gyms at the time. We were still doing those. And as I got more involved in the coaching, I started to create systems in my business that I didn't really have to be in it anymore. And the cool thing is I decided I wanted to be a CEO of my business, not an employee. And so I built out systems, I built out processes. The only responsibility I really had in my business at that point was just the marketing and kind of like checking in with the day-to-day stuff with my managers. But we were doing, multi-million dollars at that point, and I'd kind of backed away. But I really got into coaching. I really, started helping, hundreds of thousands of guys who had a similar problem to me. And I began to feel like fulfilled for the first time in a long time. The training really wore me down. The training kind of burnt me out. I mean, you know how it is, the day-to-day stuff. But it got to a point where I remember 2018, it was December 31st. I came down for a meeting with Garrett, who was the main guy for Wake Up Warrior. And I made a commitment. Listen, I'm going to sell my gyms this year, and I'm going to move to California, and I am going to do this full time, and I'm going to do it in the next 6 months. I made a commitment to him on December 31st. And I remember like making the commitment, like, oh yeah, I'm going to do this. And the next day I was like, oh my God, can I renegotiate this? But so for about 2 months, I did nothing. This is actually 2017, but for about 2 months, I did nothing. I didn't attempt to do anything. I was trying to figure out like every scenario to either get out of it or get it to work. And I had a guy so we end up putting the gym on the market. And obviously I had to keep it quiet back then, but I had a guy in the first day give me a full price offer. And we went through this whole process. So it's about a week before closing. And he calls me and says, hey, listen, I got good news and bad news. Good news is we're supposed to close next Tuesday. Bad news is we just found out my wife may have cancer. And I'm like, oh man. And he goes, we'll find out, in 5 days. And so I said, listen, why don't you find out what's going on and then let's talk. And so he comes back 5 days later. He's like, listen, my wife has full-fledged stage, cancer. And it was rectal cancer. And so she basically was going to have 6 to 8 months of just going through treatment. And then it was another 6 to 8 months. And I said, listen, I coach guys, your wife needs you. She doesn't need you to open up a gym. There's no way I can sell this to you. And I want to make sure that my people are going to be taken care of. There's no way you can do both. And so I basically said, no. And he said no. And so we went about our separate ways. Well, I had a manager that had worked with me he literally worked with me for probably 14 years. I didn't think he was going to be able to buy the gym. And I went to the guy that was helping me and I said, hey, how do we make this work? And so I went to my manager and just presented, hey, here's what's going on. We had it sold, but I really believe that you're the one that's supposed to be here. And we end up selling. He ends up, getting qualified. We end up selling him the gym, selling our house. We closed on the gym that year in August. And, I was hoping to be done in July 1. We ended up moving to California at the end of July. I started working for Wake Up Warrior. I kind of realized I didn't like having someone else manage me. And about 6 months later, my contract ran out. I had an opportunity to either continue working for them or to start my own thing. And so I launched Habit-Based Lifestyle. I launched my book, Man in the Mirror. I launched a podcast, and I just kind of went into coaching. And I've been doing it for about a year and a half. And, me and my wife ran a marriage boot camp, a couple of those. We run a program right now called Power Couples. And then, I'm doing Habit-Based Lifestyle, and we kind of do that on the back end. So, and that's kind of how we got to where we are today. So
I think that the only thing I have to say is holy shit. I think that is really the only I love storytelling, and obviously you know a lot of my story. Um, just incredible because, you know, in 25 minutes, you took us from when you were slinging steroids to people in the gym to selling a multi-million dollar fitness company to then launching your own personal branding business and coaching practice. I mean, Jesse, just amazing. And again, it goes back to something that you and I talked about, is that everyone sees the glory, but they don't know the story. It it
Yeah.
it took you 25 years to get to where you are right now. It wasn't something that happened overnight. And people say the same thing to me. Oh, you're killing it. You're killing it. I may be killing it right now, but I had to go through the 23-year journey that I've had to go through to get to where I am today. And I've just gotten started, just like you. You know, we've been
Right.
doing this for a few years, but we, once the mind expands, it takes you places where you never dreamed you can go. So I'm basically going to ask you a question that's putting the last 25 years in a box, and I hate to do that, but I want you to try to extract what you can from it. So all the stuff that you went through, the personal challenges, you know, the going back to the seeking approval of your father, and you know, selling illegal steroids, and having your first child at 19 and having to give up on your hopes and your dreams as an athlete, and finding the gym and meeting your wife and having kids and getting disconnected and then getting reconnected, all of these ups and downs. What would you say was the greatest lesson that you learned about yourself through everything that you've been through?
You know, the biggest thing I learned about myself is resilience. Is, you know, I can think back to how many times I wanted to quit and I wanted to give up. And, you know, I think there's just something to be said about wanting to give up is different than giving up, because, you know, wanting to give up means it matters. You know, giving up means it doesn't matter. And, you know, to me, that all comes back to resilience. And, you know, just having this ability is like, wanting to quit isn't the problem, quitting's the problem. And, you know, wanting to quit means that we can build that stress, that we can build that resilience up in our mind that says, okay, listen, I want to quit, I want to give up, you know, but there's something more that's coming to me. And it's kind of like our opportunity to really build that muscle of resilience. And you know, when I think back, it's like for every struggle you have, there's a strength on the other side of that. For every weakness you have, you know, there's power. Every pain, there's a power waiting for you on the other side if you just don't give up. But if you give up, if you quit, you miss out on that. And so I always think about, like, I can think of some really dark times. I mean, I didn't share with you, you know, I was in domestic violence counseling from 19 to 25. I didn't share with you, you know, that I had to do, you know, drug treatment, where I had to call a number every day and my color came up. I had to go in. I didn't share with you like a lot of dark times, but, you know, those times and going through those things and not giving up really helped me in business. They really helped me, you know, as a husband, as a father, because let's be honest, like if you're an entrepreneur or you've went through anything in your life, you're going to feel like giving up. You're going to feel like quitting. But it's an opportunity for us to really tap into the resilience. And like I said, it's like our mess becomes our message. And to me, knowing that, hey, one day I can share this with someone else who may be in a dark place, and that can help them out of their place, like that's super powerful.
You know, T. Harv Eker, the author of The Secret of the Millionaire Mind, always talks about how every master was once a disaster.
Yeah.
And and I think that everybody, you know, we've all been through some shit. We've all been through the mess of life. But the one big thing that you did did speak on that I always talk about is that the only way to fail is to quit. If you don't quit, if you don't give up, you are guaranteed at some point, it could be a year from now, it could be 10 years from now, you're guaranteed to figure out some sort of way to get the clarity, to gain the success, to live the life that you truly deserve. And that's what it's really about, continuing to move forward. And I love the mission that you're doing. I love the work that you're doing with men, because I always speak on is that every man possesses a masculine and feminine, but feminine in the sense that every man has a masculine side, and we have our emotional masculine side, where it pays attention to our feelings and our emotions. We're not afraid to cry. We're not afraid to share how we feel. And me being a very emotional male, it's what's causing my relationship with my fiance to be just so dynamic and so incredible, because we can talk about things. I can listen to her, where you and I both know there were times in our lives where we couldn't pay attention for 2 minutes if the woman that we were with was telling us about something. Like, we literally, like, can we finish this up? Are you done? Can we move on now? And you learn to relax into that and really connect. And that's
Yeah.
what it's all about. But outside of that, I love the work that you guys are doing as a couple, because marriage is a beautiful thing. And people know my story. I've been divorced twice, and I learned incredible things from both of those. And if I didn't take those lessons that I learned from those two marriages, it wouldn't have led me to my fiance. And I know for certain, we haven't even, like, we talk about all the time. We've been together, November will be 3 years, and we've had disagreements. We've never yelled at each other. We've never argued. We have never gone to bed a night without saying, I love you. And it's empowering. And I used to say to her, it's important to look up to other couples. And then, I was talking about couples I was looking up to, and then you find out things about them and you're like, I don't know if I should look up
Right.
to them anymore. And what I can tell you is that I look up to ourselves. I really honor the relationship I have with my fiance, and I see you and your wife the same exact way, just being so connected, so present, so available emotionally, not only for each other, but for your kids. So I just have to give you kudos for that.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Yeah.
So
I will say one thing about couples is, like, to me, it's not about, like, cause to me I did a podcast a while back, and it was on, like, being roommates versus teammates. Like, back in 2013, 14, 15, me and my wife were roommates, and we became teammates. But as you know, teammates fight, teammates argue, but teammates also push each other to the next level. But they always have one thing in common, and that is a common goal of where they're going. And so at the end of the day, when I think of a successful marriage, I think of it as, like, teammates versus, a lot of times, in the world we live in today, it's like, hey, everybody looks like teammates on social media, but they're more like roommates off of social media. And so to me, it's never about, hey, do you fight with your wife or not, or your spouse? It's about how fast can you resolve the conflict, and can you resolve it to where you're going to the same place together, aligned as one.
Entrepreneurship is a very interesting place to be in, because every it's a messy business. And
Yeah.
you and I talked about, being psychologically unemployable. You and I both are. I've had the luxury of never having a boss. you know, because of my father's mistakes and his incarceration, that's what got me into, running my gyms, which basically made me a boss at 18 and a half, which, looking back, I'm grateful for, because, my father unknowingly taught me some of the greatest lessons. His mistakes ended up being my victories, in understanding that you can do anything you put your mind to. And it's so true. Whatever you focus on is what you become. And for me personally, I've been focusing more, growing my practice, but wanting to public speak more. And I made an affirmation at the end of last year that I wanted to do at least one public speaking event a month. And I've attained that so far this
Wow,
year.
that's
And
awesome.
thank you. And I'm going to continue. It's because I'm a one-to-many type person. I love being around people. It's just what really drives me. But what I can tell you is that, a lot of network marketers listen to this, a lot of business coaches listen to this, and there's not a week where there isn't some sort of level of frustration when you're an entrepreneur. I don't care how much money you are or are not making, because these people are looking at these people making hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars, and they're like, oh, they're fine. They got nothing to worry about. Well, let me tell you, you know, I have a team now that I work with. So, I have people working for me. And so there is stuff to always worry about at every level of your business growth, no matter how much money you are not making. And you know how the whole thing works. Like, don't get comfortable, because when you start to get comfortable, that's when, the waves start to really churn. So you always have to be preparing for what's next, because you got to flow through it. You have to grow through it. So being an entrepreneur now yourself for 2 decades, what's your message to the new entrepreneur, or the entrepreneur that's having more struggle than success, and what can they do to continue to move that needle forward to creating that life and that impact that they truly want to leave behind?
Yeah, the biggest thing I will say is, being an entrepreneur is like being in a cage fight, right? And you don't have the key to the cage. So no matter how much you kick the other person's ass, you're not going to get out unless you eventually get the key, or you eventually climb up over the top in the way that you didn't think. So I always think of, we have an idea of how we think things should go, and then there's actually the way they go. And so we have to be willing to adapt. We have to be willing to evolve, and we have to be willing to innovate in order to be an entrepreneur. And so, innovation is one of the things that I love, but being an entrepreneur is really about, we do it because we want freedom. We do it because, as you and I know, um, I can't work for anybody else. I like to do stuff a certain way. It doesn't mean that I'm not willing to learn, but I like things a certain way. And get addicted to growth, get addicted to growing who you are, get addicted to, I wrote a book, it's called Man in the Mirror. Get addicted to looking in the mirror and really looking at yourself, um, every single day, and like just checking in with who you are, because along the way, you may not feel like you're making any ground, but I can promise you, if you keep getting up and you keep going to work and you keep doing the work, that eventually you're going to look in the mirror and you're going to be like, man, I don't even recognize this guy and who he's become today. But I think as entrepreneurs, we get stuck. I always tell people, is like, listen, if you get stuck looking at the finger all the time, you miss stepping out and looking at the bigger picture and seeing how much you've grown. And if we only ever look at the target, we never actually see the process of what it took to get there. And I really believe that it's in the process where we become successful, not necessarily the result.
It's all a process, and I think
Yeah,
that's what people, they misunderstand about life. Life is a process. There's ebbs and flows. Darren Hardy wrote a great book called The Entrepreneur Roller Coaster. Because it's not a straight line. There's
right.
there's ups and downs and twists and turns and loops, and you know what? Sometimes the roller coaster breaks down and it needs to be fixed in order to run it the right way, which sometimes happens when we're building our businesses. There's a leak in the boat. There's something missing, and you have to go back and retool in order to move forward. And obviously your book and everything else that you're doing is going to be in the show notes. But you know what I want you to leave the audience before we sign off today is, what what's one thing in your entire journey, things that you've learned, the mentors that you have and have had, what's something that you still go back to as a foundation that still pushes you forward each and every day in your business and how you show up?
The one thing I think of is just consistency. And, this goes back to me working out as a kid, is just like one rep. Like, can you do one rep today? Can you do one rep tomorrow? Can you do one rep the next day? Can you just be consistent at whatever it is you're doing? Because eventually you're going to get to where you want to go as long as you can do that one thing.
I love consistency is king. I don't care what anyone says. The only way to create the compounded effect of your life is to be consistent. And I tell people all the time, it doesn't matter if you move forward an inch, a mile, or a continent. As long as you're moving forward in some way, shape, or form in a forwarded positive direction, you're going to achieve your goals along the way. So, Jess, before I get to my final question, how can people learn more about you, and how can they find you on social? And more importantly, what programs and things do you and your wife have out there for people to invest back into themselves to take themselves and their businesses to the next level?
Yeah, so I have a podcast. It's called Habit-Based Lifestyle. That is one way. I also have a book, Man in the Mirror. If anybody's listening to this, I'll get them a free book if they just message me, Jesse at habitbasedlifestyle.com, if they want a free copy. The other way, coaching is you just message me, Jesse at habitbasedlifestyle.com, or you can check out my website, habitbasedlifestyle.com, and you can just message me, fill out an application. We just set up a 15-minute strategy call to see if you're a good fit for the program and I'm a good fit for you. And then we can make a decision on that moving forward. As far as the marriage stuff, we always work with people individually, because I truly believe that people have to individually fix themselves and kind of be in power first before they bring that into the relationship. Otherwise, there's too many people pointing fingers. So I always believe is like, hey, we have to take ownership for who we are first, and then bring that into, a marriage or into together. And then we kind of take that next step from there.
Amazing. All that information, guys, is going to be in the show notes. So I highly encourage you to connect with Jesse. Just an amazing human being. And, bro, just really just so grateful for you and the connection and the things that we're kind of doing together now and collaborating and really impacting each other's audiences. So just thank you for everything that you're doing and for how you show up every single day. And most importantly, for being here with me today on the episode.
Yeah, thank you, man, for having me on. And I look forward to continuing to collaborate with you. And then also, just if your listeners are out there and they're struggling with something that may have resonated with you today, just know that you're not alone.
It's so true. Everyone thinks that they're going through this thing called life by themselves. But I think, Jesse knows my story. I shared it with him and his audience, and you guys now know his story and his vulnerability and his transparency. And I know there's somebody listening to this that resonated with something of that. So definitely reach out to Jesse. So final question, brother, before we end today's episode, no wrong answer, because this is obviously what it means to you. So what does success truly mean to you?
Success to me is, having a family, that feels like a team, a marriage that's, on fire, and a business where you're able to really impact the lives of, not just people at the first level, but the second and third level. And so really, like, to me, this is about creating fulfillment by helping, families, and their generations to come. And this is about changing and creating a legacy, man. So, yeah.
I love that. And, it's not about leaving the legacy when you're gone. It's leaving the legacy while you're still here. And,
Yeah.
and that's the big thing. So thank you for that. And again, as always, guys, please take a screenshot on your phones or wherever you're listening to this and share it on social. You can tag me and Jesse Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever you're listening. Let us know what your shares, takeaways, and aha moments were. And we both just appreciate you guys all spending this last few minutes and this last hour with us. So everyone, please enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you again so much for checking out this week's episode. And if you can, head over to iTunes, search for Network Marketing Made Simple, leave me a 5-star rating, basic review. I would be grateful for all of the support you guys can give me. And again, if you'd be interested in learning more how to utilize LinkedIn to grow your business, your brand, and your bank account, head over to my website, www.scottaaron.net. Fill out the form for your free 15-minute discovery call so I can learn more about you, your business, and how we can work together. And again, thank you guys so much. Grateful for you all, and I'll see you next time.